And what's up? What's up? Welcome in GC Live, Friday edition of the show, Friday Free for All. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. We're both rocking our Bluff Road famous football club shirts from Kev Roche. And joined now, right off the bat, he's got a very, very quick time window. So we're going to go ahead and bring him in. Is our good buddy Perry Orth. Perry, a busy man. Dude, congrats on state championship, getting engaged. Got your camp going on. How you keeping up with all this stuff, man?
Day at a time. No, it's had a good 2020, even with the pandemic and everything. But yeah, the state title was awesome. The engaged happened both within a week. After I got engaged a week before our state title game, and when our coaching staff at AC Flora was congratulating me on getting engaged, I was like, man, it's ring season. We got to go get another one of those. We did, so that was fun. And then, I got a big camp tonight at Northside Christian Academy in Lexington. And Stephen Garcia is about an hour outside of Columbia, so let the games begin.
Yeah, definitely. That's always makes for an entertaining evening, I'm sure. But tell us, man, obviously this is – I don't even remember how many years it is now, man. I've been at, I think, your camp every year pretty much. I'll be out there tonight to check it out. Maybe for the people watching or listening who don't know about it yet, tell them what's going on tonight. Tell them a little bit about your training in general, and if they have kids out there that want to come get trained up, obviously they can come see you tonight or come to one of your other training sessions.
Yeah, so I do training every week, Wednesday and Sunday, over here at Owens Field, right in downtown Columbia, right by the Owens Field Airport. And we do quarterback specific training. We'll get kids to catch, obviously, too, but really start with the basic form, then work, on footwork, pocket movement, and then the more time they spend with me, we incorporate a lot of the other in-game type of things that they'll see, whether it's, throwing off of a platform or, taking your eyes from one read to the next while still keeping a great form and base through that process. So do that. We do everything when it comes to quarterback. Then tonight, doing a skills camp with quarterbacks, receivers, defensive backs. Obviously, if you're a linebacker or running back and want to come out and get some work, come on. And it's always, especially in today's world, you got to learn how to catch the football. And so we'll have me and Garcia coaching quarterbacks, Jacob August coaching the receivers, former tight end at Carolina, and then Ryan Davis is the coaching DBs tonight. He was our defensive back coach at AC Flora this past year, AC Flora grad. And 4-year letterman at Liberty is going to bring his expertise that he learned when he was there playing ball. And great guy, had a shot at the NFL for a little bit. And so, we'll be out there from 7 to 10. Registrations at camp, bring football cleats, and we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, man. I remember Ryan. I think wasn't he in the same – he was not – it was not long ago that he was a recruit. Do you remember covering Wes? I mean, he was like I feel like he was in the 2015 class, right?
Yeah, 2015 or 16 is when he was there. I think his senior year, his senior football year was the 2015 fall.
That's right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, and if Wes covered this, I apologize. I dropped out for just a second with some connection issues. Perry, what difference in coaching style with you and Garcia? Give us a little bit of insight there for people who don't know.
Yeah, no. So Stephen, we make a great team coaching together because he does a lot of the run around, throw it all over the place, off platform, moving on the run, kind of more of the chaos, and I bring the structure. That's been our 1-2 punch. And so, half the kids will go with him and they'll do all the off platforms and the off balance and the throwing the ball deep and all that stuff. They come over with me. We're working on drops, precision, balance, alignment, form, all that structure type stuff. And it's been a great run. I mean, this is our 5th year doing it, which is insane to think how fast time goes. 2017 was our first year. So it was 17, 18, 19, 20, now 21. It'll be our 5th year doing these camps together. We've had a blast. He's become one of my best friends, believe it or not, through all of this. So we talk in some form or fashion 3, 4, 5 times a week. So we have a great time with it, and we're excited for tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back out there, man. I'm sure there'll be a lot of kids out there. excited to see Jacob August as well, man. I know he's doing a good job with the receivers and having a good time with all that as well. So want to have Jacob on the show at some point. But Perry, obviously people want to know your quick thoughts on the Beamer hire. Obviously the staff gets completed today, sort of finally. What's been – I know he's been very, I would say, hands-on as far as inviting you guys over, former players, wanting to keep you guys involved. How has that made you feel for him to put such importance, I guess is the best way to say it, on wanting the former players to feel welcome in the building over there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we can do, as far as making that camaraderie in recruiting of, hey, it's just another pitch in recruiting. We have a great Letterman group. We have a great Letterman's Association. When you are done being a student athlete at South Carolina, you're going to be taken care of. People are going to be out there trying to help get you jobs, get you connected in South Carolina. And, I'm from Florida and I haven't left. That right there shows the tremendous support that not only Gamecock alumni, but Gamecock Lettermen and fans of the program, they're going to want to help their own. And, people like myself and people like, even Steven, he doesn't live here, but the connections and the relationships that you make from being a Gamecock, they go so much further than what you would think. And so that's our role now. And him inviting us, former Letterman, back makes us want to go out to practice and be around the facility and get and develop relationships with the players to, hey, if there's anything we can do to help, that's what we're here for. We're not looking for anything, any kind of pay, any kind of pat on our back. We're just wanting to help to get our program back in the right direction. And then Coach Beamer's done an awesome job of filling the staff full of guys that want to be here. I listened to Luke Day. That's his name, right? Luke Day, the new strength coach. The guy makes you just want to run through a brick wall. He's passionate about what he does. He's passionate about people. And it's a dream come true for him to be at a big time school like this. And so they're going to treat it like such. There's the example I've been using all week is it's the difference between renting and owning a house. When you own a house, you're going to really, really take care of it. You're going to make sure the yard's looking good, the bushes are trimmed, vacuumed, cleaned, and the whole 9 yards. Whereas when you rent, you want those things as well, but you don't have that same skin in the game type feel. That's how these guys, they're taking ownership of the program. They want to be at South Carolina for a long time. And I hope they are. I really hope they are. And I think they've got all the resources to do that. And if they utilize it, they will be here for a long time.
Perry, whether it's, you hit on something that I wanted to get you to go more in depth on, culture within a program and just how important it is. And I thought about actually the program at AC Florida, talking with Coach Curtis some like before the season, during the season, after. He attributed a lot of the team's success this year to like culture and how things were set up in the locker room. So obviously you need players to win in college football, but how much, whether it's in recruiting or your performance on the field, does culture weigh in?
Yeah, it's huge because it's kind of, it's like a relationship. Like a toxic relationship wears on you, whether you're at work, whether you're working out, whether you're doing anything in life, and having a toxic culture and going to the facility being like, damn, I hate Coach so-and-so, or I can't stand to sit next to whoever in the locker room. You don't have that same urgency and passion to be there. But when you really do love the person next to you, and more importantly, when you're on the field to the person next to you or in front of you, it goes a very long way. You look at Clemson as an example. They do the best at it that I've seen, as far as building a culture where people want to be a part of it, even that don't know anything about Clemson. And that's not to sit here and talk how awesome Clemson is, because I know that's not what I'm here to do, but they do. They have a great model and they have a great formula, so we should try to copy it. And I think that's what we're doing. And speaking of AC Flora, one thing that I really liked and really, really saw, especially for a championship team, it's always player-led. The coaches never had to motivate the players to get up and go or be on time or do whatever. The senior class there, man, they really did hold kids accountable, and it was awesome to watch. Like, kids showing up late to practice, and a couple of the guys jump in their butt and be like, "This ain't happening again," or we'll handle it outside of when the coaches aren't around, kind of a thing. And so it was awesome to see. And I think that's kind of where we need to get to, where everybody recently was more worried about where they were going in the draft or what NFL scouts thought of them instead of winning while you're here. The scouts come with winning. You look at high school recruits. You guys do that for a living. I mean, it's easier to find kids on winning teams than go to some podunk school that's been 0-10 for the last 5 years to find some kid who's extremely talented, right? It's easier to go to Dutch Fork and find kids than we don't need to name schools,
Yeah, I was waiting to see who you were about to throw under the bus.
Nah, there's a handful that come to mind, but I'll leave those off the record.
Yeah, we'll just leave it there, man. Perry, I know you got a lot going on, man, so we'll let you get rolling.
Thanks.
But appreciate the time. And you were talking about buying a house. By the way, this show is brought to you by Clint Hammond of Mortgage Network.
Nice.
And I think Clint's your guy as well, right?
Clint has been my guy since I moved back to Columbia. He's done all of the homes that I've got. So he's been awesome. He's the man.
Perry is the man as well. Perry, I appreciate you, man. We'll let you get back to it, but I'll see you tonight, okay, man?
Sounds good. Thanks, Wes. See you, Chris. Take care.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, that's Perry Orth, of course. Perry is seriously like jam-packed, but he said he could hop on for a few minutes to talk about the camp a little bit, and obviously is excited for that. Fifth time, man. Fifth camp for them, 5 years going. That's congrats to him. That's awesome. And I think, dude, Perry is like the living, breathing example of what he was just talking about, of if you sort of immerse yourself into this South Carolina program, that you can, I don't want to say take advantage of it because that has like a negative connotation, but that you will be supported, right? I mean, if you want to sort of start a business, or even if you want to go into business, Perry does insurance as his day job. You want to go into a business that involves you, making sales as part of it to make your money, either owning a business or something that involves something like that. It can be very helpful to lean on the networking and connections that you make as a player. And Perry is living, breathing proof of that. He obviously does a good job himself. He does a good job with his camps and his training and his stuff like that. But certainly using the connections to get people in his door, I think has to be helpful for him.
And there's several examples of that. I think a lot of kids, and look, there's nothing wrong with this. If I was a recruit or the dad of a recruit, I would think in terms of this too. But a lot of people think, as Perry said, about development for the NFL, or they think about maybe especially in this day and time with all the name, image, likeness stuff coming down the pipe, they think about, okay, how much in this particular city, how much endorsement money is there? That's a good thing to think about. That's fair. But the reality is, man, most people on a 53-man NFL roster aren't going to see much endorsement money, even as a pro football player, right? The New York Jets 40th guy on the roster, how much do you think he's bringing down in endorsements? Not a lot, probably nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So, what you have to think about is a life setup. And so for me, like Perry's a great example. Eric Kimry's a great example, right? He's a local guy, went to South Carolina, part of one of the most famous plays in the history of this program, stuck around, became a successful high school coach. Now he's on staff at South Carolina. You think about George Rogers, won the Heisman Trophy at South Carolina, stuck around here, has a foundation. He's still revered. He's still around. He's still in the community, still very much supported. You think about Ryan Brewer from Ohio, goes to school at South Carolina, stays in South Carolina, has his family entrenched in the community, has a very successful business. So I think there's a lot of examples of that, and I think it is smart to use it as part of your recruiting pitch.
No doubt. All right, so as I said, I didn't really get to go into it at the beginning of the show because we wanted to get Perry in, get him out. This show is, of course, brought to you by Clint Hammond of Mortgage Network. I knew Perry Orth was a Clint guy as well because, once you get involved with Clint, you're going to do all of your mortgage, any of your refinance, anything that involves buying a house or refinancing a house. If you do it once with Clint, you will do it again with Clint, basically. And you'll tell your friends to do it with Clint because Clint's the man. 803-771-6933. And if you need more information, head on over to I lost it. It was at the top there. mortgagenetwork.com/Clint-Hammond. And again, 803-771-6933. And again, let's see, chammond@mortgagenetwork.com is his email, 803-771-6933. Clint's the man. That's really all you need to know. And it's a great time to refinance your house if you have a higher interest rate. Interest rates are at their lowest, I think, maybe at any point ever. So very excited, very happy to have Clint as our primary name presenting sponsor here on GC Live. Let's see. Let's get into the actual news of the day here, Chris. Again, Perry's camp will be tonight, 7 to 10. I've made it to them all 5 years, so all 4 years so far. I'm going to be out there tonight. So if anybody here on the show is out there, come say what's up. Want to give a shout out, first of all, to our boy Kev Roche, hooking us up with our Bluff Road Famous Football Club shirts. Got mine in the mail this week. Chris rocking his today as well. That was not planned, but it just happened to fall out that way. And Chris, the news is that this staff is finally and officially complete. It was completed yesterday with the hire of Greg Adkins. It was officially completed today. There's always steps. There's a process. The final step of that process is BOT approval, and that happened. Contracts have been signed. Jimmy Lindsay is your D-line coach. That had already been announced, obviously. We reported yesterday Greg Adkins will be the South Carolina offensive line coach. The BOT approves that this morning in a very quick meeting. This was very efficient. I guess they've gotten used to approving assistant coaching contracts the last month or so. So it's very quick. But Greg Adkins, we have not had a show since this news came out. The O-line coach hire took longer than the rest. I think they were working through some options, right? Adkins I think it maybe falls in to the other side of the spectrum as far as some of these hires have been young, go-getter type coaches, whereas the others have fallen firmly in the category of experienced veteran. And I think in the case of Adkins, they went firmly towards the direction of this is a guy that has been in the game for a long time, old school coach, has coached in the SEC back in the day, as most recently at his alma mater, Marshall. They had Chris, I think like 12 sacks in 10 games, which is really incredible. But, man, so you look – I know you did some research and actually did like a little profile on him before he was hired when we got word he may be the guy. But what can you tell our listeners and viewers as far as what they need to know about Greg Adkins?
Yeah, so I think Greg Adkins sort of marries together the things that you want. Like he fits the program in that when you talk about hungry coaches who are players type coaches who sort of fit the mold of the new school player, right? And sort of the vibe that Shane Beamer has built with this coaching staff. Greg Adkins fits in there. This past season was his 30th year coaching. So he's got a ton of experience. That's what I mean by marrying together the concepts. This isn't a guy that's just working his way up or some, newcomer. 30 years of experience, Georgia, Tennessee. He's been at a bunch of different places. He spent some time with the Buffalo Bills. But he's a guy who is regarded as a player's coach, and he's going to bring that type of vibe, but also has a ton of experience. Players love him. He's regarded as a good recruiter from some of the guys he's recruited in the past. Even if you want to go way back, he's recruited at Georgia. He recruited Will Witherspoon. West, talking about another Carolina Panthers guy, Will Witherspoon. Champ Bailey, Boss Bailey, DeMarcus Ware.
Yeah, wow.
Recruited. Yeah, I mean, that was a good one. And then coached just a bunch of really good players. You look back at, Aaron Sears at Tennessee and John Stinchcomb and Randy McMichael, Ben Watson, Jermaine Wiggins at Georgia. So a lot of really good players. Got a long history, but even looking at what he's done recently, you mentioned at Marshall West, 12 sacks in 10 games. Kane Madden, one of his pupils at Marshall, was one of the best offensive linemen in the country last year. PFF had his grade at third highest in the country overall, 92.5. He had another tackle who was top 20 in the country in run block grading. He had Alex Millette was the country's 4th highest graded run blocker. So several of his players on that unit that performed well as a unit were also really good individual players. So, he's a guy that has a tie to Shane Beamer and Marcus Satterfield. They all worked together at Tennessee back in 2003. Satterfield and Beamer were grad assistants at the time. So he's been around a while, but is a guy that I think is going to fit in really well with this staff.
Yeah, and you just ran down it, man. I think that's a position. Is it added value if you can have a guy who can recruit? Obviously, that's always the case. But you have to have a developer on the O-line. If you don't have that, then it's really just not going to work out. You have to have a guy who can take what in a lot of instances is a fairly blank canvas and then develop them. I think maybe people got tired of certain catchphrases for 5 years, but the idea of football being a developmental game is 100% true, especially on the offensive line, right? So you have someone who I believe is inheriting an offensive line that does have some guys that are talented, that are big, athletic kids. I would imagine, without really knowing yet, I got to think Jordan Rhodes slides back full-time to the offensive line as the guy who's going to play some guard for you with Sedarius Hutcherson gone. You look at, Jazz Turntine coming back, Dylan Wanham coming back, Ja'Kai Moore. I tell you, Vershawn Lee is someone I had someone the other day, Chris, just out of the blue tell me, hey, if Vershawn Lee can put on the right amount of weight and add strength, this kid has a chance to be really, really good for South Carolina. So, you have some young guys, and I'm missing some even in saying those. Javon Gwynn, I think you can keep going down the list of guys. Jalen Nichols. So there are some guys to work with on this offensive line that I think it should be a good fit. It's not like that's a position. Sometimes someone inherits a position that is just bare.
Yeah.
And to me, the offensive line is the last place that you want to inherit a bare position. Right. You can – okay, let's look at the two spots. I think receiver and DB are the two spots South Carolina has to be most worried about right now. Never ideal, but you can recruit guys that can come in and play at that position. If you're restarting on the offensive line, that's a terrible recipe for success. Just having – I'm not saying the line was perfect. I'm not saying that there's not room for improvement. Obviously, pass protection, and some of that can be schematic. Some of that can be about whether your quarterback gets the ball out fast. So many factors in that, man. But veteran guy, developmental type coach with some guys to work with, to me, gives you a chance for this O-line to be competitive, I think, pretty quickly, as far as maybe developing a little bit more in the pass protection side of things.
Yeah, and that'll be important just for the development of the offense overall, right? The fact that you look at it and, when Marcus Satterfield, Shane Beamer, that offensive staff, when they get in the room and as they continue to, they're in process now of internally sort of installing this offense and teaching it to the players and having the coaches all dive in on it, that's a good starting point because you're looking around and you're assessing personnel. And you're right, Wes, that the number one thing is going to be who can be our guys who are dangerous with the ball in their hands from a coach's perspective. And they're going to look at receiver and wonder about that and worry about that. But you can look at the offensive line and go, there's some material to work with here. And so that's certainly helpful. And, Greg Adkins is a guy who does have a good track record of development. Obviously, he's worked with a lot of really talented players in his time, but he's been able to maximize those guys and develop those guys with what he's had. And so that is the good news is there are certainly some good players there to where you don't have that blank canvas that you sort of referenced earlier. From here, it'll be about continuing to recruit guys who fit getting more talent in, but there's a good blend of some guys who are older, Dylan Wanham, like you mentioned, and even some guys that are still young players who have a chance to be really good.
Yeah, and we'll certainly be, I'm sure, going into the roster and going into all that in depth throughout the offseason. But nice to know the staff is finally complete. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the staff, as far as off the field positions, is completely complete. But basically, you have your head coach and you have your 10 assistants. That gives you a starting point. You're going into, I mean, this has been the quietest lead-in into a National Signing Day. I mean, National Signing Day Part 2 is 1 week from next Wednesday. So less than 2 weeks away, and it's barely been talked about. Well, if you're recruiting a kid, a last-minute situation, you're trying to add him via either transfer portal or high school guy or JUCO guy, he finally has the answer at every position of who would my coach be. And I think that's valuable. They've been able to land some guys regardless of the answer to that question, but now they can completely answer the question. And that's big. You're going to continue to see. Obviously, they have to replace Drew Hughes. That's a position, Chris, that I think is not a very public-facing position. People that really follow the team and are like into every little movement, those folks follow stuff like that. Your average fan maybe doesn't follow that. But as far as your day-to-day operations, building a roster, building a team, being successful, that's an important spot. So there are still some things that Beamer will be putting in. Some new analysts have already come on board. We saw Shaq Wilson come on board. There's a couple of other guys that are coming on board as far as the helping out with the O-line or other positions. But I think now if you're Beamer, you're turning your attention to all the little things, right? Like you have the main staff in place. Now you're okay, go out, hire the best player personnel guy you can find, figure out how you want to build that off the field staff, because I think there's going to be an opportunity maybe for some more to rebuild like the assistant roles as far as your director of personnel guy goes as well. And again, the point I think I'm trying to get at is those are not public facing type positions, but they're also still very important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you look at, like what Jessica Jackson does, the director of on-campus recruiting, you need someone who's personable, who knows what he or she is doing, to be able to interact with families, to be able to be good with event planning and putting together visit weekends. I mean, those types of things are critical to give people a good experience. But within the personnel sort of department, I mean, having a good team, a good manager, someone who has a good eye for talent, it's a huge part of the business because there's so much work that goes into it. I mean, you consider that, there's a team who's basically, among many other things, they're just going through full game films, not perusing a huddle highlight, going through full game films of junior college and high school ball and picking out plays, the good, the bad, the ugly, and getting those on tape so that coaches can get a better evaluation of guys and going through all that. There's just a ton that goes into it. So it's definitely critical for the evaluation process to have that team in place. So finding a replacement for Drew Hughes and then building out that team, however that Shane Beamer chooses to build it out, certainly very important part of the puzzle.
Yeah, dude, I mean, you and I'm not saying we have it easy because there's a lot of other stuff that goes into our job too. But as far as evaluating a guy or looking at a guy, we sort of have it easy as at least I personally, I pull up the huddle and I watch him for a little while. These guys are, I mean, they're having to dig through every last thing and cut up tape and probably, honestly, man, you're probably looking at, everybody looks at the good plays. You're probably looking for the bad plays as much as anything because you want to know every little thing about a guy. A highlight tape can look pretty good, but then obviously isn't going to contain the other end of this spectrum. Right. And if you're a coaching staff right now, Chris, there's no going on the road. There's no going to watch a guy in person. There's no just putting your eyes on a kid. I mean, dude, for how do you even evaluate a cornerback right now? You can't have them in camp. A lot of the film, some of the film, you can't even see the corner. And what would be the other thing you would do though if you didn't have camp? You'd just go watch the kid in person. You'd watch an entire game. You'd keep your eyes on him the whole time and see, does he lock down his side or not? Well, right now, that doesn't exist because of COVID. So all the more important to have someone, I think, who is a sharp guy and understands what he's looking for, because the evaluations, man, across the country, I got a feeling we're going to look back at this stretch and there's going to be a ton of misevaluations. But whoever can still evaluate pretty well with all of the issues everybody's going to have right now is going to have a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, and another layer to that, Wes, is did the cornerback even play this past year? If he was a guy from, Virginia, for instance, he didn't even have a season, won't have one until the spring, and maybe you're full at that point. And that's why, we've seen so much portal activity because, number one, it's just been more active anyway. But a lot of high school seniors have missed opportunities because coaches right now at certain places, South Carolina being one, there's almost been a little bit more focus on the portal because it's more ready-made players for programs that need help in a ready-made fashion than taking a flyer on a high school guy late. So just another fascinating piece of, how things may operate going forward. But it is a challenge right now. There are enough misses in college football anyway for a variety of reasons. I mean, when you take a guy, you could feel really good about him, but then maybe he gets hurt, or maybe you miss something. Maybe he starts running with the wrong crowd. I mean, it's really hard to tell. And I think you look at the NFL draft, they're spending millions of dollars to sign a guy. They've got deep psychological profiling, interviews, combine. I mean, they've got all these different tools, and you miss on half the guys pretty much, right, that you draft. And so and every year there's guys that are undrafted free agents, or a guy from Division II or FCS, or that turns out to be a better player than you thought. So it is tough, and particularly this year, it's a challenge.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So we had a question from Caroline on Facebook. She wants to know what an analyst does. And, I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but as far as the recruiting guys and what they do, but analyst job, lots of off-the-field type, just the analysts. I would say this, Chris. I think analysts sort of fall in two categories. A lot of times that role is a young up-and-comer, someone that's how you get your start, right? You're a grad assistant, and then you're an analyst, and you're basically doing whatever the assistant coach. Generally, you're assigned to an assistant coach. Whatever the assistant coach or the head coach is asking you to do, that could be basically anything, honestly. Other times, analysts are former head coaches or, even former coordinators, just guys who are maybe trying to get a restart or at the end of their career and are coming back and wanting to provide, maybe that experience and provide information for you. And they're probably not going to be asked to grind as much and to do all the little things, but it's really another way to put them on staff and have someone else have a different opinion involved, have a different set of eyes, have somebody that can maybe do a little extra evaluation for you, or even do self-scout for you where you're evaluating yourself. But the young guys that are analysts, Chris, you can probably speak to this more than I can, but man, to me, these guys just have to grind it out. Like they're working, I don't know how many hour weeks, and their job is to pretty much do every little thing, any little thing that's asked of them.
Yeah, a lot of them, and when I say this, I'm being completely serious. I mean, a lot of them are sleeping in the office during the season. I mean, that very much happens. And it's a little of everything. It depends on how it's structured, how the coordinators, how the head coach structure things. But it could be everything. I think you nailed it, Wes, self-scout, or, maybe during the summer, it's going back and combing through a tape of, like, let's just say Georgia hires a new offensive coordinator and he's got 20 years of experience. He's been at 7 different schools, or maybe you're pulling all his film, you're charting all his plays, maybe you're going through and you're looking at tape. You might be looking at broadcast tape from television because you can see signals of teams. You're trying to match those up to see if you can pick off some signals. I mean, there's all sorts of different things that go into it, but a lot of it's related to film, situating practice film from your own team, situating game film from other teams, trying to organize information, in a manner in which to where you can present it to the coaching staff and they can use it to help make their calls. That's really probably the biggest function of these analyst types, is just to really dive into film and try to get information that you can use to your advantage.
Greg on Facebook wants to know any idea when Connor Shaw's role will be settled. I haven't really heard anything on that lately. Have you, Chris?
No, I sure haven't. Again, I think unless it's something that we have missed so far that we haven't heard yet, it's a situation where it's still being sorted through. Maybe a combo sort of role with something similar to what he did last year, plus something a little bit more football centric, but we haven't heard quite yet what his sort of title or exact job description is going to be.
It's probably going to be whatever Connor wants it to be. If I had to imagine, I mean, he's the type of guy you want around your program in any capacity possible. I think so. Where do we want to take this thing, man? We still got. I don't want to cut it completely short. If y'all have any questions, we probably have some folks who didn't get the memo that we were going a little bit earlier. We may be going a little bit earlier, probably in the future. We'll let y'all know about that. We got a super chat. Appreciate that, AJ. It is Anything Goes Friday, so hit us with what you got. AJ says, is anyone else frustrated that we extended Bobo as an OC under Beamer, which cost us Helinski to the school, who was a great kid? Frustrated. I will say this, Chris. I think that it's safe to say that there was an opening for Helinski to come back after Bobo left. And I also think it's safe to say that South Carolina never really seemed to pursue that.
Yep.
Agreed?
We're on the same page with that. Agreed.
So yes. I get fans' frustration because of how the Bobo thing played out, because it is frustrating that you keep a guy on, let him bring on his friend, no pun intended, to hire, to run your O-line. But I think it rubs you the wrong way, the way it played out. But I think if South Carolina really wanted to push to get Ryan Helinski back, I honestly think they could have.
Yep.
They chose not to.
And I think a lot of people are going to have a hard time believing that or dealing with that, right? Just because of sort of maybe the outside perception, or just because of his ranking being hard to believe, or maybe some things, that maybe he showed his freshman year, earlier in his freshman year. Maybe people have a hard time coming to grips with that. But we both independently, Wes, have heard that. And so it's a situation where there was a parting of ways, and then it just has stayed that way, right? And that afterwards, after Bobo left, you're right, sort of South Carolina's choice, and a lot of people are going to have a hard time dealing with that. But it sort of is what it is. So I think you answered it in really the most accurate way. I don't think I could really, add anything else on that.
Well, yeah, and I don't think there's a lot else to add. I mean, people want for there to be more there, I think, but there's just not. South Carolina moving forward, Ryan Helinski moving forward. He's committed to Northwestern. I think that'll be a decent fit for him. We'll see how he can fit in there. They have a really, really good structured program there. And I think everybody here will wish him the best. It's just obviously not going to be at South Carolina. Let's see. We got several questions we can hit on now. Appreciate y'all sending those in. Michael from Facebook, did we get any kids from Tennessee that are entering the portal? No, I don't really anticipate South Carolina getting any of those guys either. And actually, it's being reported now, I saw on Twitter, that there's a possibility of some of those guys returning to Tennessee. So we'll see how that plays out. Our buddy Travis Edwards, what's up, Travis? Hope you're doing well, man. Have a good weekend. Is this the deepest DL rotation South Carolina has had? I'm not ready to say that yet. I think, Chris, that there is an opportunity for it to maybe be. To me, the defensive line is going to have to play at a higher level than it did this past season for me to be ready to say that. Now, as far as, stacking recruiting classes, having a combination of older guys and younger guys, that it's certainly not bare. And that unit, I've said this before, on the defensive side of the ball, man, that unit is going to have to carry the way for South Carolina in 2021 because of the question marks you have elsewhere. There's a lot of guys to work with there, a lot of guys that can be in the rotation. When I think of deepest, I don't just think of people, not just bodies. I think you got to have guys that are contributing and guys that are able to, if you're a backup, come in and maybe you're not on the same level as the starter, but you're able to keep playing at a high level. They're going to need some guys, in my opinion, to step up before I'm willing to say that. But, if a Rick Sandage steps up and has a big year, if a Jakeem Green can come in and make an impact, if Birch and then Tonka Hemingway take a big step, freshman to sophomore, then, yeah, all of a sudden that unit is the strength of the defense, I think.
Yeah, and, I would have a hard time saying it's the deepest ever for the exact reason that you said, Wes. I mean, are there some guys who have talent in this group? Absolutely. But, I mean, look, you go back and look at, say the 2011 group, where you've got, Devin Taylor and Chaz Sutton and Melvin Ingram and Jadavian Clowney, and then you've got, Travian Robertson and Quarles and Byron Jerido, JT Surratt, who's a really underrated player, in that group. Man, and then 2012, I mean, going forward to 2012 as well, really, really good group then. And what I think was the best Carolina team probably ever, that 2012 group had a really good group as well. So I would pick one of those sort of at the height of South Carolina's powers when they were really, really good on defense. It started up front. They could just send four guys, and they're really, really hard to deal with. And so, yeah, I would go to one of those groups. I'd have a hard time toppling one of those with this current group, although there is some promise, I think, within that unit.
All right, let's run through these real quick. Zachary wants to know what's going on with Jordan Mosley. Chris, I haven't gotten anything super recently on him. I was supposed to talk to Mosley yesterday, was not able to connect with him. That's a guy, though, South Carolina has been in it, for a while. I think they're still in it. We'll see what the numbers end up looking like. We'll see where Mosley's head is in the next week and a half. I tend to think they're pretty strongly in it, but I don't really have the goods right now, is what Chris and I call it. I don't have the goods on exactly where he's going to be headed. You got anything to add to that?
I don't. I think South Carolina is going to have a good shot. But here's the thing, Wes. Look, working through the numbers, right? If the two kids from St. Francis end up counting, if everything works out admissions-wise, I mean, how many spots are left at that point? 2, 3? Yeah, so you got 3 spots. I mean, man, and so the staff's going to eventually have some decisions to make. But, Mosley's still someone who's on the stove burner. You just got to sort of figure out where things go from here. But they'll have a shot. They're going to be in the game.
Dude, he's a pretty good player.
Yep. Oh yeah, he is.
I'm tempted. I'm tempted to use one of those 3 on. If it's me, I'm very tempted to use one of those 3 spots on him. Craig wants to know, in recruiting in the future, if you haven't been vaccinated as a prospect, we have to mask up during visits. Just wondering what the future will look like. It's a good question, man. I tend to think that something like that probably will be the case. The last thing you want is to bring kids to your campus and have a recruit, give COVID to your team and have it run through the team, or the opposite, a recruit come to your campus and then go back home and have COVID. That's not going to leave a very good lasting impression of your school. So you have some of these coaches are older, which obviously statistically we've seen in college, most of the guys who have gotten it, have been fine in the long run, but you don't want for a kid to come and give it to an older coach either. So I imagine as the vaccine, now I don't know legally what all you'd be able to require. I don't know enough about any of that stuff to really say, but I imagine there's going to be a vaccine required in a lot of instances, maybe even just to travel. You're going to maybe have to have a vaccine or have proof that you medically can't take a vaccine. Maybe I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into it where people start responding with political stuff, because that's not where I'm taking it. But it's a different world right now. We all know. And Chris, don't you imagine there's going to be a push to have as many people vaccinated as possible if they're going to be traveling among, a college campus in general?
Probably so, or even taking recruiting out of it just for more normal football season. I mean, remember in the off season coming into this year when COVID first hit, a lot of coaches and people in college football were saying, man, I don't know how the season's going to happen without a vaccine. And then they're looking and going, well, we can't have a vaccine by the time football comes around. Now, eventually they did it. It overall, Wes, went well, right? I mean, if you're really breaking down, the amount of missed games and those types of things, like things went well. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But it was better than no football in general. I think people are in agreement on that. And so, that's my question is, maybe are they going to encourage it? Probably, if I had to guess. But then if, let's say, a kid doesn't want to take it, or maybe, a whole team doesn't want to take it, what do you do then? Do you just require masks? I mean, they're going to have to figure all that out, and it's sort of messy. And we don't really have all the answers to that just yet.
All right, Chris Artis wants to know, how are the players responding to the newer positive approach from the coaches? Maybe he read my Carolina Confidential. Hopefully he did. Talked about that a little bit. But, it's still very early. And I tried to be very clear, Chris, that I'm not trying to – sometimes we get accused of building hype when we do these off-season reports where we talk about which guys have done well. And really that's all it is, hey, these are some guys we're hearing have done well and are working hard and look the part if they're new players, right? That doesn't mean they're going to dominate the SEC competition they're facing off against. But changing the approach does not guarantee you're going to win more games. But all we're saying, and this is another thing that Chris and I have really been told just completely independently and has been mentioned by lots of people, both inside the program or maybe connected to people that are inside the program. It is a notably more new school positive type approach to how you act towards the players. And from everything I've heard, now that doesn't mean there's not a guy here or a guy there who is just not balled in. I'm not saying it's 100% because there's no way to say that. There's no way to know. But in general, I think we are safe to say, for the most part, the people that are here, want to be here and want to try and buy into this new way of doing things. You've even seen some of the guys, the older, Nick Muse, basically, when he said he's coming back, he said, hey, I believe in Coach Beamer. I want to see this thing through. Jabari Ellis has been vocal on Twitter, about what Beamer is trying to build. So nothing in college football when you have this many kids it's almost rarely like 100%. You can't say every single player just loves every single aspect right now. But I think it is an overall more positive approach from the staff. I think it's a more what's the word I'm looking for? Positive reinforcement, basically, is the approach. That's a little bit more new school. And I think so far you could say that it seems like the guys like it.
Yeah, and some people have a hard time dealing with that. I'm not saying that's right or wrong because they're saying, well, kids nowadays, this and that. But most coaches recognize that a lot of the new school of young football players, it is a little bit different. That doesn't mean you don't coach them hard or guys don't want to be coached hard or don't want to be held accountable. But sometimes the messaging just being different can appeal to kids in a different way, sometimes in a more positive way. And so there is an element of sort of adapt or die, you can win both ways. You can win with the hardcore. It depends. It depends. What's your team like? What are the coaches like? I mean, all these different factors weigh into it, but it is no doubt a different vibe. And I can say with 100% honesty, we've heard from a lot of people that we've spoken with who are familiar with players on the team that a lot of them have taken well to it and have been happy with that aspect of it.
Well, and you know what, man, there's hard coaching, then there's good cop, bad cop. But also sometimes the hard coaching gets to a point that it's just, if it's the same thing over and over and over and over again, it loses its effectiveness, I think, sometimes. So at least maybe balance. You want to be a player's coach, but you also want to have discipline. You can't let it get so far to the other side that the guys just think they can get away with whatever they want either.
Right.
So all that, there's no just hard and fast, directly perfect way to do it. And every player is different. Every team is different. And ultimately, I'll go back to what Perry said at the beginning, man. Ultimately, you want this stuff to be team-led, right? Like you want the team leadership and personality to sort of take on an in-house aspect to where the coaches aren't having to do it. Shout out to Greg for our Friday tip. We'll go spend that at Columbia Craft. Maybe. Do you think this staff makes a run at Kavaris Crouch? Man, Chris, that's one of the guys on their list as far as transfers that you would have said there is a South Carolina connection here and that they recruited him very hard. The fact that it's the old staff, that recruited him at South Carolina, I don't really think there's been much indication. Things can change fast in this day, but I haven't heard anything to make me think that that's really possible.
Yeah, and we'll see. I saw that same report by, I think, Jimmy Himes, West, where there's a couple of Tennessee starters that are supposedly going back. So saying here at 12:54 p.m. Eastern that I don't know who those may be or if that's correct, I did hear some schools yesterday for Crouch on Thursday that were not South Carolina. I mean, North Carolina was one. I even heard that was likely. Now, will that change? I don't know. Florida, Texas, there were a bunch of different schools in there, but did not hear South Carolina, and I don't know that I anticipate anything coming about there.
All right, let's hit a few more of these. We have gotten more questions about the St. Francis duo than probably anything this week. Still nothing new. They're waiting. I had an update on them. I think that was yesterday or the day before on the Insiders Forum. Jason Brown said he's sort of finishing up a couple things on his end. He didn't give me details beyond that. I didn't ask beyond that, but they're not. Somebody asked, are they committed? No, they're not committed. Once they're officially accepted to South Carolina, and once they know everything's good to go and they have everything fixed on their end as well, they will be committed to South Carolina, and then they will enroll March 1st, which will give them time to go through spring practice. So let's see, Matt, that sort of answers your question as well. You asked about the quarterback room. Let's see. Ryan wants to know which offense position group will have the toughest position battle in the spring. Maybe running back, man. You got so much talent there. I mean, that's a spot. Kevin Harris and Marshawn Lloyd are going to be knocking heads with each other. I think maybe even you have co-starters there. Let's see. Chad, good question from Chad here. All the players that left, what happens with their scholarships? Do we not get to use them? If we do, how does that work? Well, you get to use them, but it doesn't change the fact that you still can only bring in 25 in a given year. So, yes, you get that back as far as the 85. There's an 85-person scholarship. It's a running limit. At any time, it has to be 85 or lower. But you still can only bring in 25. And, Chris, dude, do you remember the good old days? I know you do. When that 25 could be manipulated, and if a guy – I mean, there was a time if a guy was an early enrollee, you could push him back. He didn't count. I mean, South Carolina was bringing in 31 guys, in a class, and it was all being manipulated. Now, the SEC has this hard 25 rule, no oversigning. I think they almost are going to have to take another look at this because there's so much transferring. Right now, your transfers count as well. I think they're going to have to take a look at allowing countbacks again, or the possibility. Now, golly, I don't know if they want to throw more gasoline on the transfer portal because it's already, a raging inferno right now. But I've seen talk just on Twitter from media folks talking about do you say that transfers don't count to the 25? What about, what happens if a school just has 30 kids be like, I'm out, like I'm leaving, that transfer out? You can't even almost field a roster. So yeah. I'm wondering, are they going to maybe change and put in some provisions to where in certain situations you're allowed to sign more?
Yeah, I remember Ole Miss, I think their 2009 recruiting class with Houston Nutt, they had 36 or 37 guys in it signed. So, and people got really up in arms about that. But, so it is different. The management part, and here's the thing, just immediate, Wes, with the NCAA basically just sort of unilaterally saying, all right, guys, everybody gets a free year. Well, we've even seen at South Carolina's case, some guys are doing that. Nick Muse, Jabari Ellis, like guys that technically ran out of eligibility last year got a free year so they can come back. And so what's the relief in the short term going to be? The guess is sometime before the season, the NCAA is going to grant some type of relief to the overall 85 scholarship limit for maybe 1 year. But the 25 doesn't change. And so with the portal, it does make it harder to manage. So will they look at that? Possibly. I saw, Wes, while we're on that topic, J.E. asked, can you bring in players as preferred walk-ons later in the semester, put them on scholarship, get around that 25 limit? Answer is no. If you bring in a guy as a walk-on and then immediately put him on scholarship, he has to count somewhere. The workaround to that is if he's on the roster for 2 years as a walk-on, you can then put him on scholarship, and he does not count towards an initial counter. He only counts to the 85 at that point. So you do have to wait 2 years to be able to do that. That is sort of a built-in way to prevent guys from signing 10 walk-ons in a class and then immediately getting them on scholarship. And that'd basically be sort of like an oversigned type of deal.
Yeah, and that's actually a good rule, I think, because it blocks teams from doing that. But then, Chris, still allows you to reward what were true walk-ons who have earned their way, onto scholarship down the road. SC Scout guy asked, so the St. Francis duo are recruiting both of them in hopes that the wide receiver will play for us and the quarterback will just add depth that we need at quarterback. I don't think I look at it like that. I mean, you're always bringing guys into play, right? I mean, I certainly think, right now Luke Doty is your returning starter, but you're not bringing in Jason Brown just to be like, hey man, you're coming in as a backup. You bring in your quarterbacks to compete, and I think Luke, that's the way Luke Doty would want it too. I mean, right now, anybody that's on that roster knows that South Carolina only has 2 scholarship quarterbacks. So if you go into a season with just 2 scholarship quarterbacks, one being a true freshman, you're asking for it. So I don't look at it like that at all. I look at it like you're adding 2 players to positions of need that you hope can help you. And whether with Brown, whether that's that he beats out Luke Doty, or whether it's that he pushes and backs up Luke Doty, either way, I think is fair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, Chris, you may disagree. I don't see DeCarrion moving back or getting looks at quarterback, especially now. I think he's finally getting settled in at receiver. I don't see that happening. Reed, I don't know exactly what the 85 looks like right now off the top of my head. Patrick, do you think they will change uniform companies? I know everybody wants them. A lot of people want them to go away from Under Armour. I don't see that happening right now. Either Under Armour pays too much for South Carolina to just drop them in a time where money's going to be tight for a minute anyway. So I can't see that. Nike pays way less than Under Armour does. Billy, yes, Marshawn Lloyd rehab going very well from what I've heard. Richard, it is anticipated that George Wynn remains as football ops. He does a great job from every indication I've heard. So, all right, if we missed you, I'm sorry. Again, this has been GC Live. We're brought to you by Clint Hammond and the Mortgage Network, 803-771-6933. Chris, any closing thoughts, man?
No closing thoughts, man. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and we'll be back on Monday, I guess.
Yeah, we'll be here Monday. We'll see you then. Hope you have a great weekend. And the staff is complete, so maybe have some guests next week, because otherwise I don't know what we're going to talk about. So y'all have a good one. We'll talk to you then. Peace.